We start off with our usual prayer for student and teacher. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great vigor. May our study be illumined. We will not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Good evening, Swami. Maybe I have a small question, please.
Good evening. Yes. Well, hopefully I have a big answer.
It's just maybe sometimes when there is an atmosphere of discord all around, you say that it's good to keep tuned to the divine thought or to the truth. And could you help finding some practical thing we can do to not be disturbed by what's going on around? Sorry for my English.
No, that's okay. That's a well-phrased question and understood. Maybe I'll answer that by way of a story, and most of you will have known the story, but I'm not shy to tell it again and again also. So the story goes that a farmer had to get water for his field, and he had to go through his neighbor's property. And he had right of way to do that, but the neighbor was a little resentful and also had a curious sense of humor. Every time the farmer passed, the neighbor would ambush him with a bucket of cow dung, and the farmer would never know from which direction it was going to come. Sometimes it would come from behind a rock, sometimes from up a tree, and the neighbor would throw it and then run away laughing, not getting caught. The farmer endured this for a year, collected the water, but he managed to collect all that cow dung. And as a farmer does, resourcefully, he managed to put all that cow dung on his fields. At the end of the year, he came to the neighbor, knocked on the door. The neighbor peeped out, a little skeptically and worried, opened the door. Can I help you? And the farmer produces the most exquisite rose flower. He says, I want to give you this. He says, because all that cow dung you gave me throughout the year, I managed to plant a rose garden, and now I'm exporting rose flowers, and see how beautiful they turned out. But I can give you this only on one condition. What is that? Says the neighbor. He said that this coming year, can you please double the quota? So what we call discord is our very resource. We have to value discord as a precious gift for us, because just as rose flowers don't grow without manure, and the flower doesn't criticize the manure and say, you should be sweet smelling like me. And from this manure, the plant knows it has the inner ingredients and knowledge to know how to develop all of that into something useful and something good. Useful because the flower spreads its fragrance indiscriminately everywhere, and is generous enough to let insects land on its central core and propagate itself everywhere and allow the insects to collect pollen, useful for making honey and so on. So only man has this capacity to transform discord into harmony. So that's to do with the capacity. What about the practicality? This tuning in is important. How to tune the mind into the eternal? Well, first of all, we have to fully understand and absolutely believe that the eternal exists not as a foreign entity, but here and now in this present moment. For most people, we can put it in a devotional way. That is that this source of divinity, this source of life, this inner core that is essentially you, This entity is personal. It's personal, and every religion declares God is love. That is, we have to pause and distance ourselves from our egoistic tendency and interpretation and feel that we are actually looked after. And it doesn't take much to do it. Everyone is sitting here. Everyone is breathing, hopefully. If they're not, then please call the emergency department. So everybody is breathing, but don't think that you're doing it. Don't think that you have a pair of internal bellows and you're pushing the diaphragm muscle up with every second. You're not doing it. An entity is doing it for you because that entity has a purpose for you. That entity is a loving entity that provides you with all of the ingredients necessary for your life, for your growth, and for your increasing knowledge. That entity we call God, but it's not a God in a heaven somewhere. It's an entity that is inside you, that intimately controls and intimately regulates every single part of you. And when you break the parts down into the molecular level, then it is, and the cellular level, then it is there regulating all of that. The fact that we don't know it, and the only reason why we don't know it is we don't tune into it. We don't observe it. So we have to have a pause very often to observe that. And that pause of observation that leads us to the original entity is called meditation. So we have to be constant, thorough, deep meditators. And that meditation has to come same time every day, like charging the battery. Sometimes practical living tells us we can't maybe do it at the same time every day. It doesn't matter as long as we maintain some kind of schedule. And it has to be thorough meditation. It has to be a deep connectedness. Secondly, we have to practice japa. Japa means a constant remembrance of God through the audible means of a name, a precious name, preferably one that a guru has given you out of the depths of his or her meditation, and constantly keep that flow up. You'll know if somebody continues repeating your name, then you'll always be attentive. When somebody calls you, you'll say, yes, yes, can I help you? It's the same thing with this Lord of the universe or Mother of the universe, or however we like to frame this entity. And to constantly see that in everything, even in the events that bring us discord. What's the practical value of it? Well, apart from dealing with the things that impinge on us seemingly negatively, apart from doing that, apart from acknowledging that, apart from acknowledging our capacity to transform this discord into harmony everywhere, the trick of doing it is to constantly tune the mind into that divine all the time, through all our actions, through all our words, through all our thoughts, through all our convictions. And this constant remembrance or constant tuning is called practice, called Abhyasa Yoga, constant remembrance. Is it easy? No. It's not supposed to be easy because we are learning a skill and we are changing a habit. And changing our habits are not easy. But the more we practice, the easier it becomes. And we have to have these three faculties. We have to have absolute faith and trust, generated from Jnana Yoga. We have to have absolute dedication to activity, making it spiritual rather than secular. This generates hope and gives us then karma yoga activity. And thirdly, we have to have love. Now, if we have all these three things, the rest becomes easy. The resources that we have at our disposal are the experience of others. We call this scripture. We have the resource of a teacher. We have the resource of all the various gifted environmental factors around us. We have the capacity to think. We have the capacity to transform our environment totally. We have the capacity to generate hydroelectricity by harnessing the power of a river. And we have the capacity to think. Now, thought is your most powerful faculty that you have. And how that works is that if you take any area of discord and allow it to drag you down, even momentarily, that means that the thought that accompanies it will drag you down even further. And we also have to understand very clearly that all these things in life were as a result of a suction. That the thought at the unconscious level is creating a suction and drawing things toward ourselves. And so there's a caution. Be careful what you think, when you think it, how you think it. Try to direct your thought in a loving, meaningful way, second by second. Don't do it as a drudgery. Do it as a kind of game. And the game is using the three faculties of the mind. These three divisions of the mind, if you like, energetic divisions, we call this sattva, rajas, and tamas. But we have to have the capacity or use the capacity to see what's going on in the mental field at any given time. And when we see a slight degradation, we have to notice it. And on noticing that regression, we then allow it a few seconds, allow it a little slide, and then take hold of our faculty and insert thorough activity and elevate it like elevating a gear, elevate it to the highest, to the purest, to the noblest, using the power of a mantra and using positive words and using a more meaningful way of looking at things. See, it's very easy to get dragged into pessimistic thinking. Something happens in our life that creates a tremendous emotional disturbance in us. But we have to move on in the sense that the next second and the next second is free for us to put something new in. We have these alternatives, of course. We can look at the past and bring the old record up and try and make sense. Why did this happen to me? Why am I so unfortunate? What was wrong with me? All of these are internal conversations with yourself. But you can equally have internal conversations which are much more meaningful, which are much more truthful, which are much more elevating to the mind. In other words, instead of saying, what a pity, we can say, what a glory. But when we say, what a glory, we have to notice the glory that we find everywhere. And the whole of the universe is nothing but the manifested divine glory. If we didn't notice it, we'll drag the mind down. If we noticed it, we'll bring the mind up. This is why in chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna is telling us that it is the attention that is your worst enemy or your best friend. You can raise the mind up by yourself or you can lower it. But don't think that life is doing it to you. Life is not doing it to you. Life is life, and life has positives and negatives. Life is a roller coaster, and we can make sure that we can enjoy the ups and downs by detaching from it, managing it, controlling it. Another way of saying controlling the mind. Everyone has the ability to control the mind, But not many people exercise that to their fullest extent. It's a very beautiful statement that Sri Krishna makes, and I often repeat it because it is so profound. It is so psychologically valid. Uttared atmana tvanam matvanam avasadayat admaiva yatmano bandhu atme varipa atmanaha. Bandhu atma tvanastasya yenatme vidtma jitaha anatmanas tu tatrute vartita tve va shatruvat. The most beautiful, beautiful, profound way of thinking. Let a person raise himself up by himself, not rely on the other person to do it. By himself. Let that person not drag himself down. It's you alone who are doing that, not the external circumstance. For himself is his friend. You're your own friend. And you are also your own biggest enemy. You think the other person is your enemy? No. And to that person then who has conquered the self, that is, the physical self, the emotional self, the mental self, the mind and the senses, by the internal self, the master or mistress, that entity that sits there in a controlling, commanding position, then his own self, that is the smaller self, the body-mind complex, is a friend or an enemy, as you want, but to the one who's conquered it, it's the friend. But to him who has not conquered this, his own self acts like an enemy. So what is the means for it? Same question you're asking. Discipline, the self-disciplined and serene person remains steadfast. We may add, in the midst of all the ups and downs, in the Supreme Self, because the Self is not affected, in cold and heat, pleasure and pain, as well as honor and dishonor. The steadfastness is what we need to attain. At the moment, most people, their mind is a kind of vortex, a whirlpool, and they try to maintain it through extremes. There was a man I knew who was a very talented artist. He actually made a portrait of the Queen of England. But he had an addiction. And so at any given moment, I could contact that person and say, "How are you doing?" And he'll say, "I'm doing great because I've just been on a 2-3 week meditation retreat, let's say Vipassana meditation course, and I feel fine." Well, that's extreme because you're spending 2-3 weeks in intense meditation with intense strictures. But then when you go home after a few weeks, what do? You go down into drug taking. That's exactly what happened. So that was his life. His life was a seesaw. When he was down, he was at rock bottom. Then to remedy it, he went to the other extreme. Instead of keeping a steadiness where everything was nicely controlled. Imagine if you use that in car driving. Imagine if you have 2 speeds, fast and slow. And your fastness, your speed, you use as compensation for your slowness. And vice versa. Erratic driving. I actually know drivers like that. There's a jerky driving. They have a foot constantly on the accelerator and it jerks forward and then they ease back. Instead of being a smooth ride, it's a question of tremendous jerkiness. And they seem immune to know, to see that it's a problem. Because when you're driving, of course, you're holding a steering wheel and you don't feel a jerky movements. It's everything. It's only with your passenger that your head will bang the windscreen and then go to the back of your chair. So instead of making a peak and a trough in an extreme way, we try to make the mind as steady as possible. We do this by revaluing things around us, registering them to their correct authority, making an intimate contact with the one who cares and looks after us, namely our chosen ideal, our most beloved form of this, and increasing the intimacy on a daily basis and using the resources around us. I hope that answers your question. You see, having heard the answer, if we then put, yes, that's fine, but, then that means that there's an obstacle, a constriction in practicing, and a tendency to go back to a discord of a past. Instead of saying it happened, I can't do anything about it, but I can do something about the next second and the next second. And this is the part of the law of karma, which says that whatever we did in the past has its repercussions, and the effects may not have arrived yet. And we have to live out our life with those effects, called prarabdha karma. But the point is, the future is not determined, because whatever you put in now will create the future. You want to create a better future, make a good investment now. So we can finish off then. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.